The Philadelphia Flyers going in a new leadership direction this season. So, what will we see from them on the ice? We discuss that and more on today's special season preview edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, your team every day. The NHL season is less than a week away, and Locked On's season preview coverage continues as we welcome on one of the hosts of the Locked On Flyers podcast, Rachel Donner, to talk about everything you need to know about the Philadelphia Flyers for the 2023-2024 season. Rachel, thank you for joining me today. And as we talked about at the top of the show today, obviously some big changes in leadership for the Philadelphia Flyers uh, this season. So was that the biggest move of the offseason for the Flyers, or were there other things that could potentially fall into that category?
Yeah, I'd say that's the biggest meta move that the team made. Obviously, hiring Keith Jones as team president and Danny Briere as GM, both former Flyers, familiar with the team culture, and ushering in, according to their marketing department, a new era of orange for the team. And I think as far as more significant moves that they've made, I think they did sort of establish a new tone for what they're trying to do with the organization. And I think the two biggest moves were trading Ivan Provorov away. I think, when you trade your number one defenseman away, you signal the rebuild. The big R word is actually here, and they're not afraid to say it. And, they got some significant assets in return. Now they had to take some salary cap dump in order to do it, but we got a second first round draft pick this past year, which is huge for the Flyers. And I think the other big move was in that draft, drafting Matvei Michkov. I think that it's a pick that past Flyers regimes would not have done, would not have taken that risk. But the reward potential is so high for a high end player like him and a dynamic forward like him. And given the rebuild status, it's an easy choice because we got the time to wait for him.
Absolutely. And it is interesting because for the Flyers' perspective, obviously this season is all about evaluation and seeing what the team has, what they can build around going forward. And so, not necessarily going to be measured by team success, wins, losses, things along that line. And so, for this next question, I would imagine it probably involves the front office in just evaluating players, but is Keith Jones and Danny Briere, are they the most critical pieces to what the Flyers need to accomplish this season?
I would say yes and no. I'd say obviously they're going to set the tone for what kind of player that they want on this team and who will fit in the rebuild moving forward. I think you can say that there is an important player that's going to be a little bit make or break, and that's Sean Couturier, because he has not played in the league for a year and a half, has just gotten his first preseason game under his belt, and I think that given his high end two-way skills as well as his face-off skills, which man, the Flyers have had horrific face-off percentages over the past couple of years, and missing Sean Couturier was a huge part of that. And so keeping the team competitive, even if they don't win every game, keeping the game exciting and competitive is something that's very important, especially for a John Tortorella coach team. Having a guy like Sean Couturier back is gonna make a big difference along those lines and set the tone for the younger guys.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about Joel Farabee because as we go through kind of your breakout players, you had keyed in on Farabee as a potential player to watch this year because of what he was able to do last season in limited action. Is he going to be able to build off of that for the 2023-2024 season?
Yeah, so going into last season, Joel Farabee was just coming off of neck surgery. He got the same surgery that Jack Eichel had gotten, and so we all really feel like he did not play up to his potential, but understandably so because he was spending the first several months of the season working toward getting to 100%. And I think he did progress as the season moved forward. And this season is really the first season since his injury that we're getting a chance to see what a 100% Joel Farabee could look like. And, he only had 15 goals last season. He could probably pot 25 to 30 if he's at his peak. And I'm looking forward to seeing if he can accomplish that.
Now, in terms of what a successful season looks like for the Flyers, I'll phrase it this way. What are you hoping to see from the Flyers this season? And, on the flip side, if things don't go according to plan, what would that look like?
Well, I think the biggest task for the Flyers this season is figuring out what we have, right? So if we're in year one of a rebuild, we have to figure out what pieces we want to keep moving forward and who is going to be, potential trade at the trade deadline, or who are we going to let go and not give a qualifying offer to for the RFAs next season. And I think this season we need to get as much data as possible because there's about 4 or 5 forwards and definitely 4 defensemen on that list, and that's a lot of guys to evaluate and, really could be high risk if you don't have the right information you need. So I wanna see what all these guys can do, more on the NHL side of the borderline that we have going on. There's Tyson Forster, there's Wade Allison, there's Tanner Lazinski, but then on the sorta AHL-ish side of that line, maybe we have Elliot Denoye, Ollie Lixel, Bobby Brink, Samu Tuamala, and on the defenseman, we've got Ronnie Attard, Adam Ginning, Emil Andre, Helge Grants. There's so many names that are really solid players, but not necessarily elite players that we got to figure out who are pieces in this Flyers puzzle moving forward.
It will be all about seeing what is going on the ice this season. And if you want more on the Philadelphia Flyers, make sure you follow Russ and Rachel at Locked On Flyers on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And make sure to check out the season previews for all 32 teams across the Locked On NHL channel. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.